Hello, welcome. This is a presentation on the WCAG 2.1 AA Standards Accessibility Checklist. I've been working recently to try to distill the requirements from the WCAG 2.1 AA Standards into a short, simple checklist. This presentation is a culmination of those efforts. I hope that you find this to be helpful in your work. I'm hoping that I've been able to isolate the main impactful elements of the standard so that you can implement those changes in your courses. There are going to be some elements that are outside of that require a little bit more computer experience or knowledge of HTML coding. Those things are going to be a little bit more of an advanced session, but this, I believe, will get us a good percentage of the way there and hopefully will be a valuable resource for you. Our agenda for this training is going to be, we're going to be starting off talking about what is WCAG. We've heard the acronym before, but what is it? Where does it come from? We're going to talk about some available resources for you. We're going to talk about 10 principles, and these principles are principles that have been distilled from the 50 standards. And I'm going to give you some principles and some ways to test and make sure that things are operating. And at the end of that, I'm going to give you a simple checklist so that you can go over your own course materials and make sure that they are up to standard. First off, what is the WCAG? We've definitely heard the acronym before. It is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. The WCAG 2.1 AA standards were created by the World Wide Web Consortium. Interestingly enough, the World Wide Web Consortium was started by Tim Berners-Lee, who was the creator of the World Wide Web, HTML, the URL, and HTTP, which is pretty interesting. He was the founder and is currently the emeritus director of the World Wide Web Consortium. The WCAG standards are a set of internationally recognized standards that ensure that web content is accessible. They're also the legal benchmark for digital accessibility court cases. These standards are going to be required by the Department of Justice under Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act by April 24th, 2026. I do want you to know that there is a range of standards when it comes to the WCAG. There is a 2.0 and a single A variety. There's also a 2.2 and a triple A variety that requires more standards, but the one that will be required by the DOJ and the one that we will be discussing in this particular training is going to be the 2.1 AA standards. I want to be clear that this does cover all web-based resources used in your class, so not only teacher-created content, but also things that are referenced outside of the learning management system. If there are any videos or resources or open source textbooks, all of those things are also going to need to meet these standards or need to be addressed in some way or remediated in some way. There are a bunch of available resources to you or for you. The Faculty LMS Resource Guide, check it out. We've got a whole accessibility section. There are a variety of different trainings in there. Specifically, we have long trainings related to creating accessible documents and PowerPoints. We also have shorter on-demand trainings for particular things that you may find you have trouble with. I want to show you a couple of things here that I think might be useful. One, you're going to find in the LMS faculty resource guide at the very bottom. If you scroll down, you'll see additional resources. If you click there, you're going to see a link for level access must-have WCAG checklist. It's a really handy checklist. I'd like to show it to you really quickly. This checklist, you will have to give them your email in order to get access to this checklist, but I do think it's worth it. It's a pretty handy resource to have. The checklist it has a lot of information leading up to this, but what I want you to take away from this particular viewing is just the number of requirements that there are. So these are the level A criteria, which are required in the AA standard. And you can actually go through and use this to select whether or not they pass. And we'll just do a quick scroll through so you can get kind of an idea of what these standards look like and how many there are. In here, you can ignore these ones with a little blue thing. That is 2.2, not 2.1, so those are not required currently. Awesome. And then we start getting into the AAA. These are things that if we could do it would be good. They're not currently required, but they are kind of the above and beyond level of web accessibility. So if we can do some of these, that would be great, but they are not currently being required. I want you to see this full list just to understand that this is a complex process, but I'm hoping that I've been able to distill a lot of these different requirements down to a set of principles and then even further down to a checklist so that you're able to confidently move through your course material in a pretty quick way while still meeting all of these standards. Another resource I want to point you to, this is from Angelo State University, and it's just a really awesome checklist. This is their digital accessibility checklist. I think it's really well organized. If you're curious about text and links, you can go to that section under the details. These are all directly related to the WCAG standards. I think this is extremely well done. It's well laid out. It's easy to use. This is a great resource. This one's also going to be available in the additional resources section of the accessibility section of the faculty LMS resource guide. Definitely check this out. I think this is an awesome list. Is a great setup. You do also have available to you an accessibility awareness course within our learning management system. You can find this, I believe the best way to find this is if you do course search down here at the bottom. You can search for accessibility awareness and this course will pop up. If you are just getting started and you're kind of at a loss and you're not sure what to do yet, this is an excellent place to start. This is a good place to start. Start working through, and in the last one, you're actually going to start doing some implementation and working your own module. If you kind of already have a little bit of a feel for some of this stuff, you may be able to work through the faculty LMS resource guide, but if you feel like you're not quite sure where to start, this is the place. There are a couple other resources that I want to mention, but we're not going to go over currently. If you're getting into doing alt text and you're kind of unsure about alt text versus descriptive text, Arizona State University has a really good resource for that, and same for complex images such as charts and graphs. We're going to be talking about some of these digital tools a little bit later. There's a link in the resource guide for both Andy and the Web AIM contrast checker. Both of these I think are just invaluable testing tools. They're super easy to use. They're just bookmarklets, so they work on kind of the bookmark bar of your browser. I think they're great. So we'll be getting into those here just a little bit later. These principles inform the checklist at the end, so if you can understand and pick up on the requirements in these principles, whenever you go to use this checklist at the very end in your courses, you'll see the references and you'll understand how to test for them. Using clear and readable text. I want to point out that it's really important to use sans serif fonts. I know that a lot of us, especially I, grew up reading a lot of Times New Roman. It was kind of the standard. And the sans serif fonts are just a lot more readable. I know even now, whenever I'm going to read a document, if it's in Times New Roman, it just tires me out a little bit more. I can read a lot quicker with a sans serif font. My comprehension goes up. So you stick with sans serif fonts. It's usually the standard with most word processing tools now. But avoid any serif fonts with the decorative little things at the end of the characters. You don't want to use shape, bold, or color alone to communicate information. You always want to include labels or some kind of written context. If you can think about it like this, you want to try to engage multiple senses. So if you've got something and it says click red for false, you want to have that color sense is great. That's awesome that you've got red, you're using color that is engaging. You want to also label that color with false. That way, all of your important data points are engaging at least two senses. When we're engaging multiple senses, we're engaging our students, and we're also giving people who need a different sense in order to get the information a chance to be able to acquire that. A couple of places that this happens is whenever you're selecting, click red for false, but it also occurs in instances like the due dates are in bold. You want to just try to clearly label those as due dates as they go down instead of just using bold to communicate that piece of information. You also want to ensure your content supports custom text spacing. One of the easiest ways to do that is to just zoom in. If you're using a web page, zoom in on the web page, see if the text adjusts correctly, see if it gets bigger, see if it maintains some kind of reasonable arrangement. That's kind of a quick way to be able to test for that. It's important to create descriptive links, a link that clearly articulates where the link is going to go. I think a good formula for this is using action verb plus what it is. So for instance, this one is learn about accessibility guidelines from W3C, and that kind of gives me an idea when I click this link where I'm going to go. Download the Andy bookmarklet here. Review this AASU website on alt text versus descriptive text. Those give the reader an idea of where the link is going to take them. This is really helpful for a screen reader because if you have something vague like click here, you don't know where that's going to go, and the screen reader can't tell you where it's going to go. And so it's just kind of this vague thing. So having some kind of descriptive text tells the screen reader and tells the person, click here for this or download this here so that they know what happens when they interact with that. You also want to avoid using a full URL because the screen reader is going to have to read out each of the characters in here, and those URLs can sometimes get pretty lengthy. We want to be sure we're structuring content with proper headings. This is true not only in Word documents, but also on online for HTML websites. We want to make sure that there is a proper heading structure, and I'm going to show you here in a little bit a way to test for that. We've done some trainings on this already. You can find within the Faculty LMS resource guide for creating accessible documents. We also have some on-demand training if you're just curious how to do that in Word. One quick way to test for this, if you've got a Word document pulled up, you can take and select a little bit of text. I like to right click, go up to styles. You can see here that I've got heading highlighted. Try another one. We go down to here, right click, styles, get heading 2 highlighted. The reason that this is helpful is this is going to give a screen reader a layer of structure so that it's able to navigate through a document. If you have an exceedingly long document, there's not a way for a screen reader to break that up into smaller pieces so that it can navigate through it. So it needs that heading structure so that it can move through the document so that it can understand it. It's important to format lists and tables accessibly. Again, we've got some training already available on this in the LMS resource guide. Again, it's important to be using headings here. For lists, you want to be able to use the toolbar buttons to create lists rather than manually indenting or styling them. I'll show you an example real quick. So here, I've actually used the toolbar to create a list here. You can see it's selected up at the top. Instead of just numbering one dot space, I've used the actual feature within Word. The more information you can give the program here, the more information that program is going to be able to give a screen reader later. You want to stick with using tables strictly for presenting data, not for visual layout. You want your data to be clear in a table so that it can be moved through the screen reader. You want to avoid unnecessarily merging cells because that can make it hard to move through the data in some kind of reasonable way and understand things because you can end up with weird blank sections and it doesn't then make sense. And it's important to use clear row and column headers. That way the screen reader can mention those column headers as it moves through the document. We want to provide text alternatives for images. This is going to be important because screen readers need that information for images. We want to be sure that we're adding alt text to all non-decorative images, charts, and diagrams. We want to avoid images of text unless it's needed for visual emphasis. I think if the amount of text is less than 125 characters, which is the maximum for an alt text, then I think it's probably okay. If you have more text than that, then we should probably reconsider whether or not we should use that image of a text, or we need to put an accessible version of that down below it. You really want to avoid any flashing, blinking, or sparkling animations. GIFs can sometimes be problematic here because those things can trigger seizures in some folks. So you just have to be really careful about these. I want to here show you a tool called Andy. I think it's a very helpful tool, and it can give you an idea of whether or not websites contain proper alt text. So to get Andy, the link is going to be available in the faculty LMS resource guide under additional resources, or you can probably search Andy and download. It's created by the Social Security Administration. So once you get to this screen, all you got to do is drag this little thing up to your bookmark. If for some reason your bookmarks bar isn't showing, you can come over here and select show bookmarks bar right here, and that'll pop up so that you'll have access to it. You will need to keep this bookmarks bar up so that you have access to Andy. I'm going to show you real quick how this actually works. So we'll select Andy up here. It's going to pop up. I want to point out a couple of things. Andy is nothing is absolutely foolproof, perfect in terms of these accessibility testing. You have to have a little bit of knowledge. You have to have some understanding of how these things work so that you can use them. It's also not going to pick up on everything. There's some places where it doesn't work. There's some places where it has trouble picking up on images. You'll also need to re-engage it every time you navigate to a new page. So it's not perfect, but I think it's really helpful. One thing that you can see here is up at the top, there are some different modules that are available from focusable elements to graphics and images, links and buttons, color contrast. There are also some options going off to the right. So if I select tab order, this will be, you can see if you're going to move through the document using just your keyboard, this will show you the tab order that it would follow. This would show where the tab key is going to take you. You can also see title attributes, what each one of these elements is titled. The thing I want to show you here is the graphics and images one. So if you click graphics and images module and then navigate to an image within your document, it will highlight it. But if you notice up at the top left, it says Andy output and it says my courses banner. It then will give you the actual alt text for the images that are in there. So this is the search icon at the top of the menu bar. And this is really helpful if you're using a website and you want to see if there's actually alt text in it or not. Because again, anything that we're referencing within our courses is also going to need to meet these accessibility standards. I have an example for us here. So if I navigate to Andy and move down to graphics and images, whenever I highlight over this, this tells me what a screen reader would say. Vector art illustration of a cheetah under the moonlight. Sounds like a good description. Vector graphic design of a winking penguin. Sounds like a great description. This is a really helpful way of ensuring that the images within a external website are actually accessible to a screen reader. In your own My Courses page, you can usually select the image and find the alt text, and you probably will have done the alt text. But this is a really invaluable tool for being able to identify that alt text in external facing websites. Using color carefully. Color is important. You want to be sure that you're maintaining strong contrast between the text and the background, and you want to avoid using red-green or red-black or blue-yellow combinations. I'm going to navigate back to Andy again because I want to show you the contrast checker built within Andy. If you go to color contrast, I'm actually going to be able to select like the text here, for instance. It'll tell me the text color and background color, and it says the contrast ratio up at the top, and it says that it passes. And this passes for the WCAG standards that we're currently needing to require. So this is a great tool for being able to analyze contrast. as you're moving through, especially external facing websites. You can use this on my courses as well. So if we go to my courses, we can navigate to color contrast, and then we can select these things and it will tell you whether or not that works. I do want to mention the Web AIM contrast checker because it comes in handy in specific instances. Let's say this image right here, Andy's not really picking up that there's text right here. So if I use my contrast checker from Web AIM, then I'm able to actually select, using the eyedropper tool here, the color that's in the front and the color that's in the back. And then that will give me the contrast ratio here. This is useful in for images of text, or if text is kind of overlaid in a way that Andy's having trouble parsing out. It's useful, also free resource. A link for it's also available in the additional resources section of the faculty LMS resource guide. Ensuring keyboard navigation. A minute ago, we discussed briefly the tab order using Andy. I'll show you that again. So if I go to Andy and then focusable elements, I can select tab order. You want to make sure that this is reasonable. You don't want it bouncing all over the place. You want to make sure that it follows some kind of reasonable order so that you can move through this document if you had to do it with your tab key. If you want to try it, you can try just clicking tab through there. If you hold shift tab, it should go backwards. But that's mainly how you ensure that keyboard navigation is going to function. Captioning multimedia and including transcript. It's important whenever we're creating lecture videos. I think the best way to caption those currently is honestly to upload them to YouTube. The auto captioning AI that they're currently using has gotten really good. You still need to verify that the captions are correct, that they are reading correctly, but it will get you, the auto captioning feature within YouTube will get you a long ways towards having a complete document. It also helps whenever we upload our things to YouTube and then use a link back to our LMS site. It helps keep our LMS site a little bit lighter and helps with those course imports over the next semester. It's also important when you're doing these recordings and you're doing these lectures, you want to start working into your lectures, really spending some time on any visual references you have in those. So we want to avoid vague pronoun references for key visuals. If you've got a visual in there and you think it's important and educative, lean into that. Spend some time talking about it. Imagine trying to follow a recipe on YouTube and you're over like trying to chop and work and put the thing together, and then they say, okay, we're going to add a quarter cup of this and a dash of that. Then you have to stop what you're doing, go back, figure out what they're talking about. So as you're working through your lecture content, if you've got some visual elements in there, just spend a little time on them. Describe what the image is, describe what it's of, describe why it's there in the first place. Why are you using it? What is the educative purpose of that thing being on the slide? And really lean into that. We want to be using accessible file formats. We do have a new software coming that's going to replace Ally, which we're hoping will be able to remediate PDFs. We really want to avoid those scanned image only PDFs. And we want to share files in accessible formats using Word, usually, or tagged PDFs. Using templates or built-in styles helps preserve structure and reading order. That kind of goes along with the headings and thinking about PowerPoint specifically. You want to make sure when we make our PowerPoints, if you use the templates that are already available within PowerPoint, that the reading order will already be established. But if you're moving those around and changing them and deleting stuff and adding stuff, then it's likely the reading order has gotten kind of scrambled and you'll need to reestablish a reading order so that a screen reader can move through the PowerPoint in a reasonable way. One way to establish whether or not your PDF is a scanned image or whether it has the text data in it is if you look at the PDF and you're able to highlight the text itself. That means that the metadata for the text is within the document. and that's gets you a long ways towards making this an accessible document. We need to establish that it's been tagged correctly and that it has the appropriate heading structure, but being able to highlight text like this is going to get us a lot closer to having an accessible document than something that's been smushed onto a copier at some point. This, whenever I try to click and drag and highlight text, doesn't work. That's because this is an image of text. It's not actually text. It doesn't have the metadata associated with the characters here, so I'm unable to select this, and a screen reader would be unable to read this. There are ways of remedying these PDFs, and we're hoping that the new software we're getting to replace Ally is going to be able to do that. You can also use, and we have a link for this in the faculty LMS resource guide, there's a clever way to use Microsoft OneNote so that you can extract the text data out of an image like this. It's pretty good. It's not perfect. You'll have to make sure that it's correct. You'll have to go back through and edit it and make sure that it's right. But it's pretty good at being able to perform. It's called an optical character recognition, or OCR, but Microsoft OneNote's pretty good at it. And finally, you want to make sure that you're checking your work. There are a lot of different accessibility checkers, even in Word and PowerPoint. You can run through the accessibility checkers that are built into those. That'll help you with a lot of issues. You can use browser extensions like Andy and tools like the contrast checker from WebAIM. In general, when you're designing assignments, you want to avoid time limits or give users the options to adjust them. And you want to, again, avoid content that flashes more than 3 times per second. That can cause seizures, which is extremely dangerous. So if you're using any GIFs in your course, or if you're pointing people towards external websites, you really want to make sure that you don't have any content that's going to be flashing at them more than 3 times per second, because that can be very dangerous for people. The simple checklist that's going to be included with this training tries to really distill these principles taken from these 50 WCAG standards and just tries to put them into a checklist. If you've gone through this training and you can use this checklist to go through your course, I feel like that will get you a huge chunk of the way towards making sure that your documents are going to be accessible. These are things to keep in mind as you're designing coursework into the future. And of course, as you're working through this stuff, if you find out that there's anything you need help on, feel free to reach out to Teaching and Learning. We're always here to support y'all. And I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for doing the important work of getting your coursework to be accessible. Accessibility is important. And if it's done well and you integrate it into your workflow, it doesn't take that much longer, and it ends up helping not just students that need it for accommodation reasons. It ends up creating better designed course materials for all students.